All right, I think we can get started now. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I know a lot of you must already be fatigued of being on Zoom now after I think it's like almost 7 weeks or 8 weeks. I can't even remember the day anymore. Um, Thank you for like taking time out of your busy schedules, and we hope that you've been enjoying the series of Brightside talks and sessions that we've been holding over the last few weeks, and we hope that you found them informative. Based on feedback that we received during our previous sessions and just from, anecdotal information, talking to our partners and to, organizations working in our sector, we've come to the conclusion that, discussing evaluation and monitoring is quite an important aspect of our work during COVID. And we want to make sure that, all the activities and things that we're doing across the sector and within our organizations and beyond have some reporting of impact. And we know that, moving things digitally can sometimes be confusing, particularly during this time. So we thought that we'd put on a useful session to kind of support your initiatives and your monitoring of the impact that you're going to be doing through your new or continuing digital initiatives. Before I get started, I thought it'd be useful to go through a bit of webinar etiquette. I know that you have all probably been to hundreds of webinars by now, so you're pretty secure and knowledgeable of how to, unmute yourself, how to mute yourself, how to turn on your video. For the sake of this presentation, the first half will be presentation based, so we'll be having a few speakers talk about their approaches to impact. So during that time, it would be great if you could stay on mute and turn off your video and use the chat box to comment or ask questions throughout. And there'll be time at the end to kind of ask the presenters questions. And then we'll have like a breakout session, as you'll see in a second when I go through the agenda, and there you'll be able to unmute yourself and chat with video if you'd like. If you want to join our conversation online, please go and use the hashtag digital outreach and tweet us. We love getting tweeted at. I know my colleague Chris will probably retweet you if you do. So it's your chance to get, Twitter famous if that's what you're into. We also have LinkedIn, obviously, so please go and find us on there if you'd like as well. So I kind of alluded to this at the start of the session, but the purpose today is to kind of access peer support, share learning, come up with ideas for planning, measurement, and reporting of your impact. And we want to use the space to, continue to share existing good practice and tools, to speak to each other about any ideas and challenges and opportunities that come out of digital outreach and how we measure those. And we're really lucky today to have Heap come and speak to us about how they track and monitor their online interventions. We've got Anna and Rob, and they'll be able to kind of share their approach and also share how they could support you in your approach. And then we also obviously have our lovely CEO, Laura, well, almost CEO, as you can see on the screen, but basically our CEO, and she'll talk to you guys about our approach at Brightside. So hopefully you'll find those three presenters, really helpful. And then finally, we will have time for questions. So please do write any questions you have down in the chat box. And I'll make sure to facilitate that at the end of the presentations. And then we'll have time for a breakout session where all of you can speak about, what issues you're tackling, how to approach those issues, and what areas and ideas you have for, tackling the concerns that you have about monitoring and evaluating digital outreach. So yeah, if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat box and we'll be able to answer them at the end of the presentations. On to you, Laura. Oh, sorry, Rob.
Great. Hi, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. Do shout quickly if you can't. I'm just going to spend the next 5 minutes or so just talking about some of the differences that we need to take into account when collecting and monitoring online delivery. Before I do, a quick walk down memory lane for those of you who don't know me. I've been at Heat probably just up to about 4.5 years now. Prior to that, I spent about 5 years at 2 different HEIs delivering outreach and recruitment activities ranging from assemblies to summer schools and open days. And even prior to that, I was part of a careers team in an FE college as well. So part of what I'm going to highlight comes from both practice and theory. The first half will be me speaking, and then I'll pass over to Anna, who will talk about the impact side of this. So if it's, we can move on to the next slide, that would be great. Lovely. So before even thinking about how we could record your engagements and evaluate and monitor the impact, first of all, I'd just like to highlight the importance of considering how you may choose to collect your data online and online from your participants. Many of you here, I can see lots of familiar names, are HEAT members and have access to the range of features that we have within our database. But a lot of this will also apply to anyone running online activities. So typically the sector collects student data using traditional pen and paper method. I know some of you have more recently transitioned across to electronic methods, either online surveys or using iPads or devices like that. But based on the current situation, this is obviously now a must. So those who do collect it electronically typically have a higher completion level of data, much more accurate than those collecting from paper forms. So I just want to take the opportunity for you to consider what your needs are when collecting participant data, and obviously ensuring that you're including the same data you would normally, but maybe take the opportunity to collect more sort of personal details if applicable to your data needs. I'm not obviously saying collect data for data's sake here. For HEAT, the minimum tracking is name, date of birth, postcode, and school or college information. And of course, the appropriate data sharing permissions, which I'm not going to talk about because I've only got 5 or so minutes left. But you also, as I said, I want to take the opportunity to ask additional monitoring information like ethnicity or disability for more detailed ongoing analysis. And this will actually benefit you in the long run, as HEAT also includes this in some of the reports that we publish, both at a member level and at an aggregate level, so it's supporting the sector too. And I suppose there's also a point here that the COVID-19 pandemic could obviously impact specific groups much greater than others, so we can start looking at the impact that we have on specific target students. On my slide here, I've included the HEAT event program, which allows for online data capture, collecting data from your participants, but also providing opportunities to collect data for follow-ups. So if you've maybe had to restrict engagements for certain activities, you can obviously contact students outside of these sessions. But mainly it creates an end-to-end process, as this may provide a participant and non-participant comparator group, which Anna's going to talk about in a bit. As you move online, you'll sort of find it easier in certain cases to collect data. And again, moving on to the next slide. The feature here is the HEAT registration tool. And again, because we're now sort of not desk-based and not able to kind of share information as easy, the registration tool here, you can provide unique links to participants and also staff to collect data online. So therefore not having to share data virtually, you can collect it online. And again, for HEAT members, this does sort of transfer straight into the HEAT system, making the process much smoother. So moving online, I think actually data capture may become easier. But there is obviously a downside to online delivery, and that it's actually trickier to record the likes of exchanges, contact hours, and what content's being delivered, which is something I know myself and Laura at Brightside discussed at great depth when they first came on board. So just moving on, that's what I'm going to talk about in my next 2 slides. So as you move online, you may need to adapt your methodology for recording interactions. All of the points that I'm going to talk about now, I've discussed with members during the recent lockdown. So firstly, exchanges. Each time a learner participates in something, our members record this as an activity. So most of the time, an assembly is an exchange and a summer school is an exchange. However, online delivery can be very different. An example of this is email exchanges. So obviously, will be very different depending on the delivery that you're offering. But if you imagine e-mentoring, where ambassadors or staff share emails with students, then this could either be recorded as one exchange for the group or series of emails sent between them, or 20, i.e. one per email. So how do you need to record this internally? And that's a question I think I often ask members is, what are your internal reporting needs and how are you going to be using this data in the long run? Obviously, if you are able to log each individual email, then what you can use that for is to compare impact. However, this will likely see a huge increase in the number of exchanges that students have or are receiving versus the actual activities they're receiving. This is fine, especially from a heat standpoint, as context is really important to help with impact evaluation, especially when looking at the impact of one activity versus another. The key point I'm going to take here is to be consistent when logging these activities. And obviously, for our heat members, we do provide a range of recommendations for a range of activity scenarios. Moving on to contact hours. Again, when delivering, sorry, I've got something beeping in my ear. When delivering face-to-face sessions, you can be confident of the students that you engage with, but for online delivery, this becomes much trickier. And here, accuracy is the key for long-term monitoring. Therefore, we recommend that if you can't be accurate when you are recording contact hours, that you don't record the contact hours itself, but continue to record that engagement as an exchange, obviously the activity. I personally don't think we can replace face delivery with online, so the content and the context can't be compared. However, in this situation, it could be strong evidence for the importance of face-to-face delivery, similar to how our national aggregate reports shows a higher progression rate for on-campus delivery versus school or college-based activities. So therefore, if you know the actual direct contact time you've got with your online learners, then record that. Obviously, if not, take into account that and maybe don't record the contact hours. For digital resources, again, things like email shots, we have a range of things like that on the database already, but you may still want to log these and continue creating sort of your online profile or your log of student interactions. So just moving on to my final slide before I pass on to Anna. Again, context is going to be really key here, I think. Traditionally, presentations that we deliver face-to-face cover a set topic or whatnot. And this is very hard to be replicated when doing online because we typically offer more of a fluid drop-in style opportunity for learners. Obviously, if you are delivering something like a face-to-face, you have the opportunity for Q&A as well, but you also meet an expert in the field. So for anybody I've spoke to about typology, you just may want to take into account these as different types of activities and maybe look at the style of your activity or the engagement level or mainly the outcomes of each of your sessions, as this will probably create a stronger basis for comparison when the time comes. My final point, very short sentence there, is considering the types of students that we're engaging with. Anyone who's delivered activities will know that schools, when they're bringing students on campus, if they bring the whole class, they're more likely to bring a range of interested students, some who want to participate and some don't. Definitely know I've had that the case. But typically online, we see these as being self-selecting. So therefore, there's going to be much more high sort of outcome here that they are already interested in higher education, so therefore have different concerns or different sort of barriers in this case. So that's me. So again, very much kind of some of the things that you might want to take into the Q&A session. And I will hand over to Anna to talk about examining the impact.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna Anthony. I'm the Senior Data Analyst from HEAT. I'm going to turn my video off because whilst Rob was talking, it said my internet connection was unstable and I don't want to lose the connection. I think having the video on perhaps doesn't help with that. So hello and goodbye, but you will still hear my voice, hopefully. Okay, so if it does drop out, just send me a message in the chat or something and hopefully I'll figure that out. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about the impact reporting that HEAT provide and mention a couple of new things that we've been working on since lockdown. I realise that not all of you are HEAT members, but hopefully you'll find it useful to see the approach we're taking with impact. So once you've captured the data for your online delivery that Rob's been talking about, how can you go about showing impact? Well, HEAT provide 3 standard reports shown on the screen now based on participants you track through our database. So the first report we provide shows the key stage 4 or the GCSE attainment. So you work with them before taking their GCSE exams. And here we produce a Hello, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Great, thanks, Anna.
Is that, shall I, what was the last thing you heard me say? Now I'm testing whether you're key stage 4.
Yeah. Key stage 4.
Okay, so I'll go from key stage 4. So you might have heard the bit about how we're working on a way to come up with a more suitable comparator group. But we've been working with the research groups to get the key stage 4 and key stage 5 tracking reports we do as meaningful as possible, because the Office for Students are asking for evidence that universities have been raising the pre-entry attainment of their outreach participants. So the second report is actually coming soon. This is the key stage 5 or A-level tracking report, and this is based
It looks like we're having a few issues again.
Right, I'm back again.
Thanks,
Sorry
Anna.
about this. If it becomes if it keeps happening, then we might have to think again. But I'll keep going. Shall I keep going?
Yeah, maybe try one more time, and if not, we can we can either, if Rob can do it, or we can move on to Laura's and you can come back to yours afterwards.
I'm going to just also get my phone to log off the internet just in case that's doing anything. Okay. So the HESA track, we have this year, we have a new dashboard that lets you compare progression rates for different activities. And in report 3, we also report on our HEAT groups, which is HEAT student group model. So we're looking at progression rates for students with similar levels of prior attainment and from similar backgrounds. Right, so slide 2. The next slide, please. Right, this is the second of my 3 slides, so we're nearly halfway there. So this is our HEAT track jigsaw, which shows the journey of students and the educational data sets we're tracking through. We do less with UCAS now due to issues accessing that data. And at the bottom, we've got the 3 reports I just mentioned. And the thing I wanted to say here is that we can't share the underlying data sets for the Key Stage 4 or 5 reports, so reports 1 or 2, due to restrictions around sharing that data that comes from the MPD, but we can share the student level HESA data that makes up report 3. So you're able to do a lot more of your analysis locally using that data set. We also produce aggregate reports for each version 1 to 3, as well as ad hoc thematic reports. So our most recent Key Stage 4 report included a breakdown by member type, so this being Russell Group, pre and post 92 and UniConnect partnerships. And these reports will soon be on our externally facing website for people who are groups that aren't HEAT members. But if you are a HEAT member, you can access them in the file store. Right, so nearly there. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. So because of the restrictions around sharing MPD data that I've just mentioned, we're now offering members bespoke reporting. And this is something that's fairly new. So if you haven't been keeping up with the HEAT announcements, you might not have heard about this. So this allows you to decide on the cohort we report on. So the current Key Stage 4 and 5 reports, these being reports 1 and 2, are based on all participants you've recorded on HEAT, but we're offering to rerun these reports based on a subset of participants. So this might be participants of a certain intensive activity or activities from a selection of partner schools. If you received one of the Key Stage 4 reports in December, which you would have got through the file store, but you haven't already requested your bespoke report, please do get in touch with us. And there's more information in the note sheets which accompanied that report. If you didn't get a member level version of this Key Stage 4 report, you can also look at the aggregate, which is in the file store, or if you're not a HEAT member, you can soon access that via the website. And finally, I just want to talk a bit about comparator groups, as we're improving the reporting we can do here. Rather than using the school average in the reports that I mentioned earlier, by defining a carefully matched comparator group, you can increase the claims you can make with your evidence, or raise it from a type 2 to a type 3 according to the Office for Student Standards of Evidence report. So as you know, comparator groups are usually made up of individuals who did not take part in the activity. You can compare their outcomes with those who did take part in the activity, those being your participant group. Now, we currently do a lot of tracking and reporting on participant groups, but less on comparator groups. But we now have a way that we can track students from your comparator groups and then report on them and provide you with their outcome data alongside that for participant groups. So we've just released a new video for members, and the link's there. That's available on our website, and it tells you how you can go about selecting a comparator group, ensuring they're as similar as possible to your participant group, and that's really important. And then in the video, we explain how to record their data on HEAT and then request a report giving their outcomes. So this is all a really important step forward for HEAT, as it means we can start making causal claims from the tracking reporting we provide. So I made it to the end. And in summary, we're now trying to be a lot more flexible in the way we surface, particularly the data from the NPD, so the Key Stage 4 and 5 attainment data, because we can't share that at student level. So we realise we need to report on it for you in a meaningful way. We've had really good feedback from some members who are saying that they now don't have to submit their own NPD requests. And we're also working with members to increase the capture of comparator groups and to raise the standard of evidence to be capable of making causal claims. And we are planning on working with TASO HE and also the UniConnect's capability team to try and push that and progress that work. So I made it to the end. Thank you very much. Shall I pass back over to you, Milena?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. You know what, like surprisingly, this is our first webinar, a bit of a webinar dropout in the 6 that we've been doing. So thanks for, being the first.
That's all right. It's my second webinar I've done, and they've both dropped out at critical points. So I think it's something about where I live. I live in quite a rural area. But anyway, we made it, so that's good.
That's what counts. Thanks, Anna. It was really useful and really informative as well. As Laura said, we've learned things that we can also take on board at Brightside.
Great, thank you.
So Laura, it would be great if you could now talk to us about our approach at Brightside, and I'll pass the baton on to you.
Thanks, Milena. Just to introduce myself, as briefly, I'm Laura Gray. I'm currently head of programs here at Brightside, but imminently stepping up into the CEO role. So I'm kind of here with both hats on. I'm going to talk to you today about Brightside's approach to monitoring and evaluation. But I'm trying to keep it as practical as possible, because at Brightside that's kind of the approach that we take to monitoring and evaluation, and I will kind of pick up a couple of points that Rob and Anna have made in their presentation, because we are HEAP members, so I can talk to you about how we've used that membership to the positive. So Milena, will you move on for me? Thank you. So first and foremost, I just wanted to touch upon Brightside's impact vision, because our monitoring and evaluation kind of falls out of this. So at Brightside, we talk about the fact that we are an impact-led organisation, but we've really done some work as to what that means. So as a charity, we have an overall mission, which is that we want to help young people make confident and informed decisions. In order to achieve that impact, we've broken it down into kind of 6 key areas, and kind of holding ourselves to account on each of those, so that we achieve our kind of overall impact mission. I won't go into in full detail, but essentially we want to ensure that we are working with the right people. That means the young people that will benefit most from the intervention that we provide, which is online mentoring, and those that need it most. So really ensuring that we are meeting our overarching mission of equaling out society. We want to ensure that we are always delivering the highest impact projects. So we want to continually learn to ensure and develop our monitoring and evaluation, so that we understand the impact that we are having on each individual, but also at project level, so that we can continually make improvements. That moves on to kind of number 3, which talks about flexing our work. So we want to have an impact strategy which enables us to recognise when things aren't going so well in a project. I'm sure none of you have experienced that ever, but occasionally things don't go to plan. And what we want to be able to do at Brightside is to be able to react to that in the moment. That's kind of a long-term vision. There's some things that we can do now, but it's the trickier thing. How do you recognise when something isn't going as well as you'd hoped? It isn't looking like you're going to achieve the impact you hoped for. And what levers do you have during a project to kind of change that? And at Brightside, we are kind of really delving into that at the moment. We want to hold ourselves to account. We have impact KPIs. We want to get better each year. So I'll talk to you about kind of the things that we record and the things that we are kind of looking to achieve. And we want to kind of create benchmarks, so that we are not only kind of looking externally and kind of seeing how other interventions are doing in the space, but also how we are doing as an organisation, and are we improving year on year. So it not being frightened that one of your the outcomes that you might be looking to achieve, you don't achieve that one year, or you don't achieve that within a particular project, but recognising that you haven't and trying to improve upon it. We also want to share and learn, and kind of things like this are very much part of that ethos at Brightside. I'm going to talk to you today about kind of our approach. I'm not making any claims that it's the best approach ever, and I really want to hear from other organisations as to what they're doing in the space, so that as a sector we improve upon the work that we do with evaluation and monitoring, ultimately, so that what we're doing is improving the interventions that we're providing young people. And finally, number 6, which is the one that I'll spend most time on today, is having the right people, processes and tools to deliver the impact vision. So it's no good having kind of this overall mission if you don't have the tools at hand and the culture and values that kind of underpin that kind of that target to kind of have a quality impact vision. So if I move on, I'm going to spend the rest of the session talking about that number 6, which is how at Brightside we try and ensure that we've got the right people, processes and tools in place to have to do kind of quality digital evaluation. So first and foremost is the people that we have at Brightside. We're a small team, there's 15 of us, and we are mission driven as an organisation. We recruit for people that are mission driven. We check that at kind of all stages, but we also have a set of values that underpin impact. I've kind of highlighted the two that kind of really talk to that, and that's that we strive for positive and lasting impact, and that we're committed to quality in everything we do. Now, every single person at Brightside is committed to those values, and as such, they are committed to ensuring that the work that as an individual you do is both quality, but also looking to have an impact on the young people that we're here to serve. We don't have an evaluation team, and we don't have anyone that is solely responsible or dedicated to monitoring and evaluation, and that's because we're small and we just don't have the capacity or the resource to kind of put into that. I'm always jealous when there are kind of whole evaluation teams that can spend their time really analysing and picking at data. We don't have that at Brightside, and we're unusual in that. But what it means is that we have a delivery team, and Milena is kind of part and parcel of that, who is responsible for reporting and evaluation. So as part of their role, it's embedded in the way that they work. And so it's not separate from facilitation, from practitioner-led learning, it's combined. So whilst they're thinking about the kind of practicalities and project management of the work that they do, they're also thinking about how am I going to report on this at the end, and how am I going to prove the impact that it's having. And I think that that's a kind of really crucial and positive thing that we have at Brightside, which keeps that impact at the heart of what we do. We also have an internal working group which reviews our learning, and that's really crucial. We don't want to get into the habit of writing these really beautiful evaluation reports and just popping them in a drawer and never looking at them. And we're really keen on kind of bringing that learning to life. And acting upon it. And so we have a working group that kind of holds that to account for us as an organisation, and it has kind of a member of staff from every kind of different team within the organisation, so that we ensure that we're getting lots of different perspectives, and you don't get kind of down the GDPR rabbit hole that can be monitoring and evaluation. Sometimes you kind of take a step back every now and again and really think about the kind of learning that you've done and how you can apply that to changing the way that you kind of work. Milena, will you move on, please? Thank you. So then kind of moving on to the processes that we have at Brightside, and hopefully some of these will be things that you're doing, and some of them might be things that you'll take forward. So we have, we use an evaluation framework as a design tool, and it incorporates the theory of change approach, which keeps our outcomes at first and foremost and leads back from that. And what we've managed to do is turn, I've kind of just posted in here our very basic evaluation framework, but what it does is it makes sure that when we're doing project design, we're actually doing evaluation design, so that when we sort of launch a program or a project or a way of working, we've already considered how we will evaluate it in the longer term. It's not something that's kind of done in parallel to project design. It's part and parcel, and kind of when I was talking about the people side of things, the fact that our partnerships managers like Milena are responsible for signing off evaluation frameworks from the project managers. So she will be looking at is the project design that we have in place, is it actually going, do we feel confident that it's going to meet the outcomes that we've put in there? And are we doing all of the practical things within the project design that enables us to prove that impact or disprove that impact, or kind of whatever happens at the end? So I've sort of outlined there the kind of the ways and the questions that we ask ourselves, which which I would say are particularly crucial when you're looking at digital outreach, because if you've got a young person online, you really need to think about how you're going to capture information from them, because they're not going to, you may not get the opportunity to go back to them. You're not, at the minute, you're not able to go back into a school and say, actually, do you mind filling out this survey now? You've got them live in the moment, and you need to think about how you're going to capture the right information from them, and how you're going to unpick your impact from whatever intervention that they're kind of participating in, which is very similar to kind of face-to-face. Milena, will you move on? So in terms of the process that we take at Brightside, we have kind of 3 key items. We have an impact framework, and that looks at what are the post-project outcomes that we're looking to achieve. So we have a theory of change at Brightside that looks at 4 behavioural outcomes and 2 capital outcomes, and all of our programmes are looking to kind of look at progress against those outcomes for the young people on our programme. And we analyse that at the end of we analyse that at the end of each individual programme. So that could be a programme that has been 4 weeks, it could be a programme that's been 6 months, but we're looking at that kind of that immediate post-project impact, and that's kind of part of our impact framework. We also have a quality framework, and that looks at whether the project is on track, and did participants, sorry, typo in my presentation, and did participants have a positive experience? So it's really looking at, did they enjoy, or did they get something out of it from their own perspective? Did they think it was worth their time and effort of participating? And for us at Brightside, we always try and find the link between what they've got out of it from a quality perspective, and whether that is in any way linked to the impact it may have had on them. So they work in parallel to each other, because as well, when I was talking about people, I'm talking about the fact that our project managers are responsible for evaluation and monitoring. So what project managers always want to know is, what improvements could I make the next time round? And we link that to both impact, but also that kind of enjoyment piece. And that's why a quality framework is kind of is one of the processes that we use at Brightside. And finally, we also look at long-term outcomes. So was the effect long-lasting? And this kind of really leans into our ultimate goal of kind of ensuring that we have a fairer society. So are the young people that we work with, what was the impact that we had on them immediately after a project, but also 3 years, 5 years, 7 years down the line? Is that lasting? Have we kind of changed their trajectory, or been part of changing their trajectory in the longer term? Can you go on, Milena? Thank you. So in terms of the tools that we use, I've kind of outlined this underneath those 3 key processes, because I thought that might be most useful way of kind of looking at it. So in terms of our impact framework, the kind of practical tools that results in are a compulsory baseline and exit survey. So self-perception, yes, which I understand that there are definite question marks under that, but it's kind of a practical tool that we can facilitate easily. It's compulsory, so that participants have to complete it, which means we get decent response rates, and is easy to analyse. We have an impact dashboard, which if you have any questions on that, it is Milena's baby. She built it from scratch and uses it regularly. But what it does is it's something you can plug your baseline results into, and it will give you a kind of any given time where that cohort within a program is against our kind of behaviours and capital outcomes. And it's kind of moving us towards that piece around levers that you have. So if you understand that young people who are participating in your program are particularly low on human capital, for instance, and more low than usual, then what do you do to ensure that while they're on the program, it's that particular outcome that you're really kind of focusing your energy on? And our impact dashboard kind of enables us to see that information live. We don't use anything fancy. We tried Power BI and it didn't work work for us. So it is just having someone with a brilliant brain like Milena's who can use Excel and turn it into something lovely and accessible. So we're just using Excel to do this, but it really does work for us. We're able, because of the dashboard, to look at kind of project level data. But also we look at it at kind of aggregate level. So the impact working group that I mentioned earlier will kind of dive into that information and look at portfolio level, but kind of the different project models. For you guys, if you, I understand we're lucky at Brightside, we do online mentoring, you do a million things, but what we are able to do is kind of compare project models. We're able to compare the impact on different age groups or user groups, and our impact dashboard allows us to kind of do that zooming out, as well as that kind of diving in at a project and an individual level to look at impact. We also collect qualitative data. So one of the lovely things about online is that you can record things, and it means that you really can get a really rich data set in terms of qual. So at Brightside we do online mentoring. It's text-based conversation. We have access to all of those conversations, so we can do kind of themed based analysis to see what young people are talking about, and you can kind of really capture that and in a way that is probably easier than face to face, because it's all recordable, whether it's Zoom or otherwise. In terms of our quality framework, we use engagement reporting. So again, one of the benefits of online is that whatever online system you're using, it will have a database at the back end. And what that database should show you is interaction and engagement. And if it doesn't, then question your supplier, because you should get information about how regularly your young people are accessing the intervention that you're kind of putting online, and we use that at Brightside. We would run weekly engagement reports, which those of you that have worked with Brightside in the past will be au fait with, but it tells you kind of how many young people are logging on, how many messages they're sending, how many messages are being sent to them, and again it kind of just gives you that health check as to kind of, is this project going where it should be, are they engaging, and if they're not, then I know in week 2 of it, so I can do something about it, rather than waiting for month 6 and going, oh no, they didn't take it up. So again, it kind of talks to that leverage that you can have and the change that you can make mid-program, which is easier online because you kind of you can take that step back and then make a change. Again, that qualitative data is easy to collect online. We include kind of qualitative survey questions in our exit survey, so that kind of asks young people specifically about how they've felt about the programme, and you can kind of use that to pick out themes that can link to impact, but also stuff that tells you about the quality of the experience that they've had. And then in terms of our long-term tracking, we use Heat and we use Heat to do that. We haven't been members long, so we received our first kind of long-term tracking last summer, and it has kind of been incredibly powerful for us as an organisation. What we've done, and kind of Rob alluded to it, is we purely use Heat from an evaluation and impact perspective. We kind of don't take up the monitoring based tools because we have an online tool ourselves, then we kind of have that database set up already. But what we've done is really we've used that exchanges field that Rob was talking about, which was which means that we're able to map back to kind of projects or programs that young people were on and how engaged they were with that particular program, and look at what that means to their long-term trajectory. So through the work that we've done with Heat and the analysis that we've received through that, we're now able to say for the first time in our 15-year history that if a young person sends 10 or more messages, and it doesn't matter about demographic, we've kind of picked at that as much as we can. If they send more than 10 messages, there is an increased likelihood that they will go to HE. So for us at Brightside, it means that the number 10 messaging is kind of our golden triangle. That's what we're aiming towards. It really talks about kind of the robust nature of the intervention required in order to hit that impact, and is a really exciting finding for us. We do other things because obviously getting into higher education isn't the be all and end all for us at Brightside. We're around confident informed decisions, and that could mean making the decision not to go to HE. So whilst that's harder to do, we do have a youth board at Brightside, and we have an alumni community which is currently kind of 1,000 young people strong, and that means that we're able to keep in touch with people who have been on programs with us and kind of do some quantitative analysis through surveys, but also that qualitative stuff through kind of anecdotal case studies. And all of those three items help us to understand as an organisation, are we helping young people make a confident and informed decision? Thanks, Milena. Can you just move on? So I wanted to just kind of highlight what those tools produce for us, because I always think it's lovely to say you get all the, you know, we do a baseline and an exit, but actually what does that mean? So here's an example of a post-project analysis. So you can see in there that that's talking about kind of progression against our behaviour, so our impact framework, but it's also talking about the experience that young people have. So 90% of them enjoyed the programme. But it also talks about that engagement, so you can see how many messages were sent and how rich it was. But I thought that this is something that kind of we put in all of our evaluation reports, but it brings to life the data, I think, a little bit, and kind of shows the depth in which we're able to kind of pull information through our kind of digital outreach. And then Milena, if you can just move on. And then finally, this is just a snapshot of kind of one of the bits of analysis that we've been able to do through our heat results, and it talks a little bit about comparator groups. So what we've done at Brightside at the moment is kind of look at our results and then look at the kind of whole the aggregate report that heat provide to see where the benchmark is, but also then looking at the national average. But we were really conscious that the national average isn't necessarily relevant in this space because we know that young people that participate in outreach activities are probably the more engaged, they're less likely to be in that kind of really disengaged pool of young people, and so comparing ourselves against kind of Polar 1 and 2 at a national level didn't feel right, so we made the decision to kind of look at ourselves against the heat membership, because we know that as a membership and as a sector there's we're kind of reaching into the same type of young person. And that's just a snapshot. If you want to see kind of more of what we've done with our heat analysis, we have a report on our website which is called The Power of Online Mentoring, and it just talks through kind of 4 of the findings from our initial HESA analysis, but again kind of brings to life the kind of longer term impact that we're having at Brightside, and for us is incredibly exciting because we've never been able to do it before. And finally, before I kind of shush and go over to questions, I just wanted to kind of give some tips for digital evaluation from where we see it, because I know that it's kind of what you're all grappling with at the moment, and I also realise that Brightside are 15 years into this, so are at slightly advantage to you guys. So whilst you're kind of thinking about how you do this in the best way, I wanted to kind of pose the question, really think about the data that you need and why you need it. I mean, that's something that all of you will be considering whenever you're building any evaluation framework, but it's particularly important online, because if you are trying to engage a young person online and you come up with the most complicated and long-winded sign-up form because it's all about identifying data, then you are going to turn them off immediately. Make that user experience clean and quick, otherwise they won't engage with the online, they'll disappear. So it could be that you break up how you collect data from them. So at Brightside, our sign-up form asks for the minimum information we need about a young person in order to put them onto heat, basically. So we only ask date of birth, postcode and name, because that's what we need, and then later on we ask them to do the compulsory baseline survey, but it means that we've captured them first. It means that they're hooked into the intervention, and then we go back to them for further information. Think about when and who you collect. So that kind of talks to that breaking up how you get information, building a picture of that young person, rather than thinking I've got to get everything in first, and risking the fact that they're going to drop out of it entirely. Make sure that your data collection is compulsory and that it's consistent. We have made these mistakes at Brightside. We had non-structured postcode inputs, and that meant that we got ridiculous postcodes, or people putting in their phone numbers in, or just not, or putting NA, and it meant that we couldn't then track them long term. If you can do it in a compulsory fashion, then absolutely do it. And think about impact, not just monitoring. So don't just think about the identifying data that you need. Think about what information you might want to capture from young people around their kind of aspirations, ambitions, that kind of baseline information that talks about impact and progression, rather than just the monitoring side of things. And another thing from kind of a tech platform to you guys, you are probably having conversations with other people about how you put your interventions online. When you're doing that, make sure that if you're the evaluators in the room, that you're ensuring whoever's having that conversation is asking specific questions around reporting and data collection and privacy policies, so that you know that the information that you are collecting from young people is being done in a legal way and in an ethical way, but also that you're going to be able to report at the level that you want to and have access to that data. So do get involved if there is kind of tender processes going on, to make sure that you're not landed with a piece of technology that doesn't give you the information that you need. Any tech supplier should be able to answer those questions, and if they can't, that should be an alarm bell for you. And don't forget qualitative. Think about how you can listen in on Zoom calls if it and capture kind of the richness of conversations, if they're kind of mentoring or coaching or anything like that. Anything a young person says in an online space, as long as you've got the right kind of sign-up agreements, you can use and analyze, and that's really exciting, and you can kind of take it away and do it, rather than kind of getting that anecdotal or case study based qualitative stuff that you might be used to receiving in face-to-face interventions. So yeah, they're my kind of short tips for digital evaluation, and I will shush now and hand over to Milena for questions.
Thanks, Laura. That was really, really helpful. Thanks to everyone who's been commenting and asking questions in the chat box. It's been really interesting to kind of read how different organizations approach gathering data. So as the first question to the presenters, do you have any examples of capturing data live in the moment that you could share with the attendees? Laura, maybe you first.
Yeah, so information you can get live in the moment is you can use things like pulse surveys. So whilst a young person is kind of using, so for instance, and I'll use what we do at Brightside, we could set a survey question that's just one survey and kind of drop that into the mentoring conversation. So you're not just getting that baseline and exit, you're also kind of capturing some their how they're feeling kind of halfway through, and you can do that kind of with a pulse survey. You can use your kind of your mentors or those that are facilitating the session to ask the question live in the moment. We do some things in webinars as well, where we kind of will pose a question to young people and ask them to kind of give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or kind of react to it in the chat box, and then that chat box information you can use. The other stuff that the other live things that we have, which is around kind of quality and engagement, is kind of the interaction that they're having with the project. So you should always be able to capture kind of how many people are attending, how much they are interacting with whatever your online is. So I think that's a few examples of kind of live in the moment data collection.
Great, thanks. Rob, do you have anything to add? Sorry, Rob, I think you're on mute.
That I am. I put it in the chat just when that question was asked, but before you all moved online and we kind of the online tool, the heat we're using was Click Meeting. So when you run a click meeting, you can create a survey and you can kind of load that up during that, and it automatically backs all of that up whilst the meeting's running, so you can grab the analytics from that straight away. So obviously, you know, there are I'm sure loads of online sort of webinar companies that offer things like that. So again, if you're kind of looking into things, I know people talk about Zoom a lot, but there are other things out there that might kind of offer something slightly different to engage your audience. It also has the thumbs up, thumbs down that Laura was mentioning as well. So again, if you're trying to engage with your students, that might be an option. And again, this is the kind of the pre and post surveys as well that you could always ask at the start and at the end. But I definitely echo some of the comments that's been going through the chat, in that it's all about trying to engage your learners or participants throughout the session and not sort of, you know, bore them with survey amongst survey.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, I've just thought of another one, Milena, which maybe you were going to touch upon, is Mentor Me. Which has nothing to do with mentoring actually at all, but it's an online tool which we use in training, which can kind of capture answers very quickly, and we'll kind of then provide them live on screen for people to see. We use it both internally and externally at Brightside, and it can be fun, although you obviously need to be aware that they can type anything they like and it will go on the screen. But yeah, it's a good interactive tool.
Yeah, I agree. I've used it before and it works really well with young people. And I think that kind of leads on to the question from Charlotte, which is around how you advise, like, in emphasizing the need for evaluation and monitoring information to young people. Like, how do you convince them that this is something useful, and why, how do you make sure that they feel like, you know, that they understand the reason for providing this information?
I mean, I personally just think that's being kind of open and honest. Actually, we've recently done some focus groups as part of the Uni Connect evaluation hub, which we're part of, which specifically looked at how young people react to evaluation surveys. We'll be publishing this externally shortly. But what was really interesting is we asked them to complete a normal baseline without any context whatsoever. So we didn't talk to them about it. We just said, fill out this form. And then asked them how that form had made them feel. And there was some really shocking results actually, which was that particularly with the younger age groups, filling out the form made them anxious and made them realise what they didn't know and worry about what they were going to do. And I guess one of the things that we learned from doing it is that it's and I've talked about it before, it's that link up between evaluation and practitioners. So really enabling your practitioners, or those who are kind of administering surveys, to also give context to why they're completing it, and then what we're going to do about it. So you fill out a baseline survey, and then you say, okay, well, the intervention that you're just about to take part in is to address any concerns that may have raised for you, so that young people feel very part of the kind of evaluation methodology, and aren't getting that kind of, oh, I'm just filling out another survey because I've got to, because whenever I do anything I've got to fill out a survey. So it's contextualizing it, I think.
Yeah,
I'd say exactly the same thing. I often say to the members that I'm running sessions with that, you know, if you don't say to when you're delivering your activities to schools, you know, there's costs associated to that, and the only way we can kind of provide evidence of the benefits of these is by collecting this data, and without the data we can't then say it's useful or not. So you know, if you can say that to students as well, obviously, you know, approach it in a slightly different angle, but you know, that is the reason for it really, and obviously, you know, for teachers maybe it's a bit easier, but so what Laura kind of said as well.
And I think from like persuading people who are moving quickly, so you know, I've seen a couple of questions in the chat about how do you persuade people to kind of be thinking about evaluation before they launch, because everyone is in active mode, everyone's aware that this is kind of a time critical period and they're trying to translate face-to-face online very quickly. I think you kind of need to flag the questions of, I always think a good one is to talk data protection at them, and say, you know, are you making sure that you're collecting the right information from those young people? Are you making sure that they're safe online? And then kind of talking and then building in from that kind of the evaluation and impact piece. I know from conversations I've been having with OFS is that, and I'm going to be delivering a webinar on a similar theme for the sector again for them, is that there is no excuses for not doing impact evaluation if you're doing digital. It in actual fact is easier for a number of the reasons that I've outlined, in that all of you, if you're doing it online, are essentially going to be using a database which will be able to provide you with analytics. And so it could be that it's an opportunity to kind of really kind of raise your hand and say, right, now is the time that you need to be listening and talking to me, because we're gonna get asked questions about what impact this had from OFS.
Yeah, I think those are all very important points, and I think, yeah, the continuity of gathering data, not just at the start, but also in between your programs and at different points, is going to be really important. So I'm conscious of time, and I know that, Laura, you've got another commitment. So thank you so much for you know, helping with the presentation, and they've been all very interesting. I know there's been a few questions that we haven't been able to answer, but I will get it to the presenters, and I'll feed that back in my post-event email. So if anyone has got any more questions, please do put them in the chat box, and I'll be sure to get them to the presenters and feed that back to you in the post-event email. So our next bit of the session is our breakouts. So this is an opportunity for you in groups to kind of discuss different elements of evaluation and monitoring, what impact it's having on your organizations. Are there any ideas that you can bring forward as a group that you'd like to share? Are there any concerns that you can discuss together? I'll be putting you automatically in random rooms with different people that are in attendance now. And when you do enter those rooms, make sure that you unmute yourself, and if you want, you can also put your video on. But it will be really important for you, someone in that group, to take notes and feed that back to us at the end of the breakout session, just so that we can gather that information and share with the rest of the group. We have put some prompts in to kind of help your discussions throughout the breakout. So number one, like, what kind of challenges you're having in online monitoring and evaluation? What are the opportunities that you have from, you know, going digital? As Laura and Rob suggested, there's a lot of different things that are positives from doing it online. So you can capture different elements that you wouldn't necessarily be able to capture if it was in person or face-to-face in that way. And if you could come together as a group and come up with some ideas that you can take back to your institutions and share that, that would be great. So you will be automatically put into groups in a few minutes. If you could, again, just pick one person to kind of take notes and then feed that back into the session after 20 minutes, and that would be great. So you should be going into groups in a few seconds, sorry, not minutes. Let me know if it doesn't work.
Hello.
Hi, that worked, didn't it? I'm always like conscious of it. Welcome back, everyone. Just waiting for everyone to enter back into the main room. Great. So I hope that you found the breakout sessions useful, and that you were able to kind of share ideas, and take things together that you might, share things together that you might take back to your institutions. If everyone could, post their learnings in the chat box, that would be great. That way we can then share with the rest of the group at a later date when I send an email after the event. If anyone would now like to share, please do raise your hands, and we can unmute you and you can kind of share with the group. Otherwise, do put in your discussions in the chat box so that we can share at a later date. We hope that you've found it useful to kind of be able to share these ideas. I know that as Rob and Laura were saying, like, this is an opportunity, but also a challenge, because we've not worked in these kind of environment before, and we're in special circumstances at the moment. So we do hope that you found the session useful and that you've been able to support each other with ideas during the last 20 minutes. Again, if anyone from your groups could post what you've discussed in the chat box, that would be great. And if you've got any questions, I will be sharing Laura's email, and the email of all the presenters is in the slides as well, so you can email them at the end of the session when so that you can ask them any specific questions that you might have for them as well. To kind of wrap up, I know that we've got a little bit of time left. I will be posting a follow-up survey just so that we can continue to get feedback of these events that we're running. Next week, we've got another one around safeguarding specifically, and my colleague Chris will be leading on this with guest speakers as well. And that will be an opportunity to kind of focus more on safeguarding specifically. I know that we've had a lot of questions around that, and that also relates to how do we safeguard when it's digital, and when we're trying to get information and impact and evaluation reporting, and how that is impacted by safeguarding as well and GDPR. So it will be a useful session that we're putting on next week. If you've got any questions, you can contact me with my emails on there, milena.lacheros@brightside.org, or my colleague Nick will be able to help with any questions around Brightside or future sessions as well. And I will be sharing the webinar slides, breakout summaries that you've all kindly posted in the chat box, and the webinar recording after this session. So if you do really want to watch it again, or if you've got any questions that you're reflecting on that you want to hear again or read it over again, then you will have these, and I'll try to get this to you either tomorrow or early next week. On that note, if no one has any questions or comments, I'd like to end the session. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks to Anna and Rob for their great contributions. It's been so helpful and so useful to hear from everyone, and it's great to see that practitioners and institutions are using the chat box to share and network. And we hope that we can continue to do this over the next few months. Thank you everyone, and have a lovely afternoon and evening.